Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to Five Questions. I'm your host, Dustin Peed. I am so pumped to have with us today one of my very best friends in history. Um, we go way back, all the
Way
way
back.
to the early 2000s. My good friend, Will Doggett, or as we like to call him, Dill Woggett. Dill, how's it
Mm.
going, bro?
It's good, man. How are you? It's good to
I'm
be
doing
chatting.
great. Yeah, I'm so excited to chat with you. You have crushed it in the entrepreneurial independent game for a long time. I've been a huge fan of yours from a distance from a long time. So just to give everybody context, Will and I used to play together at Liberty University. Back then it was called the Campus Praise Band before the word collective got popular.
So
And
collective.
so collective. We played in that team together and toured with old Chucky B, Charles Billingsley, and had a lot of fun. Some of the best years of my life were on campus with Will, and
Yeah.
going to my first passion event with Will. And Will introduced me to mute math. He's
Oh,
like
that's right.
that's
Yeah,
kind of like he's famous in my mind for that. Of like
that's
every
right.
time I talk about the band Mute Math, I'm like, Will took me to that show, and I was like, they better be good.
Yeah.
The name like Mute Math, and they destroyed. So, and I've seen them like 5 or 6 times since. So anyway, today's not about Mute Math. Today's about Will. Will, let me just kind of bring everybody up to speed on what Will does now. So, Will is a musician, obviously, sound designer, Ableton Live certified trainer. We'll talk about what Ableton is in a second to bring everybody up to speed. But after years of using Ableton Live with bands, Will now focuses on helping people get from the studio to the stage, which is the name of his company. We'll talk about as well. His expertise includes integrating Ableton Live with a band for backing tracks, creating key sounds, controlling lights, lyrics, and video. Will has always been a master of all things tech, especially when it comes into the musical world. He kind of introduced the team at Liberty to what loops were back then, and he already kind of came in with a wealth of that knowledge. We dabbled in that, and then Will just went off and just had success after success after success. You can kind of follow his journey and his story on Instagram. I won't take too much time getting into that. Enough to say that just like everybody uh, loves Will, everybody that's worked with Will wants more of it. And I just been such a huge fan of yours for a long time. Even back when we were together, I always looked up to you, even though you're younger than me, and just seeing your work ethic. And so today we're gonna hit on some creativity because you're in a very creative industry, but we're also gonna hit on mostly your process. Your process fascinates me, Will, because you are essentially, no matter what field you may be in, you are essentially a professional content creator. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today is your content creation process. Can Before we jump in, can you just give me like a 30-second overview of your company and what content you're producing so that we have a frame of reference?
Yeah. So the company's called From Studio to Stage, and the main focus, kind of all the stuff you read, it's summed up in helping primarily musicians understand and use a software called Ableton Live on stage. And that's kind of what the company does. The main product, the main source of teaching people is through the website from studiotostage.com, and it's a subscription membership type thing where once a month I release a course. I've been a little behind on products, but about once every 2 months I release a template of some sort that people can purchase and buy and use. But as far as content I'm creating and releasing, it's a course a month, some sort of template resource thing that's available for subscribers, 2 videos a week on YouTube, one of which is a podcast, so it's kind of cheating. It's like you talk and turn a camera on, you can get another piece of content out of that.
Yep, that's what we're
um,
doing right here.
yeah, that's right. Right now social's pretty light, but going to be kicking that up in Q2 of 2023. So it's just really Instagram is like the main social thing for me, and YouTube. But all of that content all funnels into. I have a couple different like free, what we'd called lead gen stuff or whatever that people download. Which I released a new one today, or an update of one today, which is partially why I was late, and have just been crazy busy trying to get that ready. And then that funnels people into the subscription thing, which is really the funnest thing I get to do, which is really a joy to like focus on. That's the whole purpose for me of being a content person is to be able to just have the fun of like spending my day helping other people
Hmm.
with something that I happen to have expertise in, which is not many things, but this is one thing that I happen to be a expert in. And I was even the other day thinking of like, how do I, if I had to sum up what I'm trying to do on the site, how do I sum it up? And I want when people to sign up to the site to feel like they're getting one-on-one training with me.
Yeah.
And you can't scale one-on-one very far. And so I'm trying to find some better ways to improve the current experience where it feels more like that. But that's the whole goal, is to get people to sign up and learn how to perform on stage with freedom and flexibility, to not focus on tracks. I mean, going back to Mute Math, like that was such a joy to see them enjoy being on stage. And a lot of times technology is not a joy to learn to use. It's frustrating. And so it's like to free people up on stage to just
Yeah.
have fun, you know?
Yeah, man, it's so good. You're so great at it. So let's just kind of dive in a little bit. You talk. I can just kind of get a glimpse into your head a little bit so far of what you're thinking about. You're thinking about different content you're going to release at Q2. You're thinking about the content that you have twice a week. You're thinking about the online courses. You're thinking about the one-on-ones. You're thinking about all these things. How do you kind of navigate all that? How do you organize it? What is My first question is, what does your content creation process look like? If I was to kind of ask you from beginning, from idea to basically rollout, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I am probably the least process oriented process person you've ever met.
I love it.
Um, because I do have a business that does rely on me consistently like producing stuff. And but I'm not incredibly like solid on that or how I do it. And I have the benefit of being a company that's just myself and my wife. And I work with two primary contractors, but they're not employees, good friends. But so I kind of have the ability to flex a bit. But and I think the other piece too that's worth mentioning before I dive into this is it's always changing. And I'm
Yeah.
in the midst right now of a big phase of trying to codify a lot of process. It's ironic we're talking about process. I'm in the process of trying to codify how I do what I do so that I can hand off things that I'm not uniquely gifted at, so that I
Yeah.
can do more of what I am uniquely gifted at.
Yeah.
Side note, fantastic book. I'm a big book guy, but Buy
Yeah.
Back Your Time by Dan Martell. It's kind of like the E Myth revisited, but like a little more practical.
Yeah.
And he talks about creating playbooks and which is standard operating procedures, whatever.
Yeah.
I call it. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying I'm a book guy too. I wanted to share this one with you as well. Today, I know you just recently moved from Austin, Texas. One of my favorite authors is in Austin, and his name is Austin Kleon, who wrote
Yeah,
"Steal
great.
Like an Artist" way back a day. But I'm slowly devouring. I could read this in 2 seconds
Yeah,
because his books are such easy reads. But "Show Your Work" is kind of all about the process,
yeah,
and having your process be an open book essentially. And
yeah,
I'm just slowly absorbing it because it's so good. But yeah, book
yeah.
guide too. I like that. Buy back your time. I'm gonna look that one up.
It's really good. Quick, you're going to have to keep me on track because I'm going to go
You're
all
good.
a thousand different places.
I
But
love it.
what I like about what Austin shares in that book, it's kind of this idea of I spent a couple years at a company doing product management, product direction kind of stuff, and in the software world, there is everyone thinks they're Apple. So they're, and particularly I did a lot of this in like the church world. And so, creativity for churches is what did Coldplay do 5 years ago? And what has Apple done 5 years ago? And this is the cynic in me speaking, obviously, but
Sure.
um, there was kind of this like mentality of let's develop a product and we're going to work on it. We're going to shape it to be perfect. And then 2 years later, we'll release it to the world and everyone will come to our product launch. In fact, as we're talking, there was a church company that just a couple of days ago had like a big launch thing. And I'm like, there's this other approach in software of agile development, which is as quickly as possible, release something, get
Hmm.
feedback on it, iterate, release, iterate, release, iterate, release. So it's kind of that show your work thing,
Yeah.
which is a fantastic book for content entrepreneurs or people creating content. But the fastest way to get better at anything is to do a lot of it. And
Yep.
so that's kind of maybe a core thing when it comes to product, but or content for me, the way I think. So as opposed to, I know, I mean, I could think of like five people on one hand that are always uh, they're always about to ship something. They're always working on something, and you're always like, "How'd that thing go?" I decided to go a different direction, and you're like, "Man, just ship, just get stuff out."
Yeah.
I'm
Create
a
quickly.
huge, yeah, I'm a huge Seth Godin fan, and Lynchpin is a pivotal book in my life. One of a couple books I can point to that completely shaped the direction of my life. But
Yeah.
Lynchpin is a big one. Just that whole idea of ship your work, real artists ship. Steve Jobs quote, kind of taken by Seth Godin, but
Yeah.
um, super important. So I think before we get to like my process, I think the most important part of the process is the shipping part, the releasing,
Yeah.
which is the most terrifying because it gets you into fear and insecurity. And um, go read The War of Art and put your big
Yeah.
boy panties on and
Stephen
go make
Pressfield.
it happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, so process for me is again, I'm refining, I'm shaping, but the very first thing is like just I think it's kind of a thing I've picked up from comedians and listening to comedians talk, in particular like Jerry Seinfeld, but just always being aware and always just thinking and listening. And so I try to capture ideas religiously. Like if I showed my overhead camera right now, I probably have 50 index. I mean, I can show you at least this. I have 50 index cards and sticky notes of just ideas and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and
I
there's
love it.
even I just lost one. There's it's
That's how
probably the
quickly
$1 million
ideas
idea.
come and go, man.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? But I'm constantly doing two things, just kind of paying attention, observing stuff. I'm thinking about ideas. I'm trying to get better at asking people questions. Like, what are you
Mm,
struggling with? I'll do like a one-on-one coaching call with someone, and I'll just ask them, hey, if I could do one video, what would be the most beneficial? And just learning really to listen to people, to gather ideas. And maybe we'll talk about this later, but I think I'm in the biggest possible shift of my career and content focus right now, because I'm sensing a change, and I'm sensing a change in the audience I'm pursuing and who the new audience is. And so I'm
mm,
very attunely aware of this like listening phase. So for me, that's then capturing all those ideas. I use Trello religiously. It's just a tool I like, but however you do it, just capture ideas. So Trello is the main thing where everything goes, and I call it content like editorial calendar. So it's just an inbox.
mhm.
And then from there, I tend to try to categorize, which is really helpful. And I like to think of, if you could see, it's like just straight out of view, but behind me is a big calendar on the wall with um, post-it notes, and I'm like moving stuff around. I always try to
Yeah.
think of like, I've always wanted to be like a writer on a comedy show, and like
Yeah, dude.
be on SNL or something. And so that idea of like the board and I'm putting
Mhm.
ideas up is
Get it
really
on the board.
helpful. But yeah, so for
And
me, the next piece,
Trello's project management, right?
yeah, Trello's project management. The big thing with
Yeah.
Trello is it's typically Kanban boards or Kanban boards, however you say it, and,
Mhm.
and so it's like process oriented.
Yeah.
But I just start with a big pool of content, wherever that goes. Next step for me tends to be like categorization of that. So where does that lie for me? Like, what's the audience I'm trying to reach? What's the group? Something I did last year that's really beneficial, which honestly I kind of miss a little bit this year, is I committed to release a piece of content every single day on YouTube last year,
Mm,
and I took a couple weeks off, and in the midst of doing all that, we sold our house and moved across country, and I pre-recorded 2.5 months worth of content. So like it was a
mhm.
pretty great process. But
Yeah.
in order to do, and people would always ask me, how in the world do you do 7 pieces of content? Well, I'm like, I'm not waking up in the morning and going, what's the idea to work on?
You
i'm
already
i'm
have it.
constantly thinking, and then I put everything into buckets. So when I
Mhm.
first started, it was like my buckets were: Monday was podcast behind the spacebar, Tuesday was troubleshooting, Wednesday was focus for worship leaders, Thursday was a podcast focused on worship leaders, Friday was focused on tracks, Saturday was focused on gear, Sunday was focused on Sunday sound design. And so I basically had 7 shows I was producing content for. And so then you just try to keep the buckets full. So then I move from all these ideas, try to categorize them, and just lay out like, okay, here's all my gear topics. And some of those have gone away. Doing that last year is really beneficial because it helped me again narrow down what audience I'm trying to reach, and who I'm reaching and who I'm not. And then from there, that moves into what I call my content assembly line, which is a Trello board, and it's literally dictated out by outline, film, uploading, editing, which gets sent off to a buddy of mine that edits, and then back to me for ready review. then I review it, then it goes to Fiverr, someone on Fiverr to make chapters for it, goes to my buddy John to write copy for it, title, description, couple of variations of that. Thumbnails right now is myself and my wife kind of collaborating on that, and then review everything, and then from there it's all distribution. And so that has gotten very like rote and routine, and that's something I'm trying to in a good way. I've figured out what it needs to be. Now the next piece for me is getting that documented and handing that off. But as far as creating that process, that's something I've learned and adapted and changed because I'm really good at bulk creating. Like I can,
Yeah.
you know, you said I'm a really hard worker, but in reality, I'm probably the laziest person I know.
It's just smart.
But
Smart worker.
um, yeah, and I think, and I used to think like, oh, I'm lazy, and lazy means you never do work, but it just means I also get bored really easily. So that means I have to kind of batch stuff. But
Yeah.
one thing I'm getting back to when it comes to the creation of content is if I go long periods of time between creating courses or creating tutorials, it's really difficult for me to get it cranked back up to a point where I'm
Yeah.
happy with it. So you can always tell if I take a break, it takes about 2 to 3 tutorials for me to really feel like I've got this dialed in
Yeah.
and nailed down.
Muscle
So,
memory.
yeah, so I'm really trying to optimize my day so that every day I can come into the studio here and record 1 or 2 pieces of content and just keep rolling
I love
constantly.
it.
So I think we're up to like April now. You know, we're recording this what in March, I think. Are we in March? Yeah, I think in March.
Yeah.
So I think I've got content through April recorded.
Yeah.
And that really helps to get you off the like flywheel of just feeling like
Hmm.
I've got to constantly create content. So
Yeah.
I know
You
what's
just dated
coming.
us because I don't think yours is gonna roll out till like May or June. But
It's I mean, I'll be on the beach sipping mimosas by then,
yeah, that sounds right.
but yeah, it's that idea of like if you think I got to constantly create content, I mean, the way to get out of the like hamster wheel is like you got to get ahead, and you're afraid to get ahead because you're afraid of like this. What if this is not the best idea I've ever had? What if
Yeah.
blah blah blah? And you're like, no, you just got to ship. You just got to get it out and release and learn from every piece. And
Yeah.
it's again that iterative, that feedback thing, and
Hmm.
listening to how people respond. And
Yeah. People will let you know if it's any good or not.
yeah, and and there's I'm a huge fan of Gary V. Like,
Yeah.
if I could design my
Content
perfect
king.
yeah, if I could design like my perfect church, Gary V would be the pastor of the church
There it is.
because um he just he talks a lot. A concept he's been talking about a lot over the past couple of months is like we've got to get past this like hating the haters thing. And I mean he shares a lot of ideas that are like central tenets of the Christian faith of like forgiveness and compassion. And you know, he talks about someone who gets to the point where they leave a negative comment on your video and call you stupid or dumb or whatever. You shouldn't hate them, but you should feel compassion for them because something's happening in their life that's like causing them to
Yeah,
act out in that way.
for sure.
And so when you create a lot of YouTube content rather, you'll get a lot of comments, and some of those comments are from people that just maybe don't have the full emotional intelligence yet. Maybe something's going on in their life, and the one thing they can control is being an a-hole to other people. And so that's like sometimes it's that.
Yeah.
And you can delete that stuff. You can try to respond compassionately, whatever you want to do. But then there are genuine comments that some people word well, some people are struggling to get there, but at the heart of it is they want to help critique to get you to something better. And
Yeah.
so you've got to have enough maturity to know when to listen and when not. But again, going back to me, and I won't get into this now. You get me there if you want later. But
Yeah.
this big pivotal shift for me in audience focus and content really came out of a couple comments that at first I ignored, and then I went, I think they may be onto something. Like I think that person that just commented that is the person I'm trying to reach that
Yeah.
I'm not currently speaking to. And so you got to listen to that, but you got to know when to listen and when to ignore.
Yeah. I have a quick bonus question for you, just out of curiosity, but something that I'm wrestling with right now as I'm starting to ramp up my first year of a ton of content creation. You talked about having the board, right? And being in that writer's room.
Yeah.
Um, not so much like I kind of I have my own process now of like, okay, that's not for now, that's a later idea, not a now idea. I have buckets for that. This is gonna sound like, are you mental? But how do you keep from doing the same idea twice when you're pumping out that much content? How do you remember, oh, I already covered that, like 2 years ago, or I already covered that
Uh,
last month.
so here's the thing that I realized that was a big fear of mine. And again, you look at let's say if we literally committed to doing the creating pieces of content for 365 days, no breaks. Let's do it. One, there's a fear of like, will I be able to come up with that many ideas? Yes. Like,
Yeah,
creativity is a muscle. It's not a thing that
yeah,
empties and you're out of ideas. When you
that's
get to
right.
the bottom, you're not at the bottom. You're just afraid that the next idea won't be as good as the previous one. So,
That's right.
you, Seth Godin always says plumbers don't get plumber's block. They just go to work and fix people's plumbing. So there's no such thing as writer's block. It's just fear. That's what I believe, and Seth
I love
Godin
it.
kind of believes that. But anyway, um, one of the most important. What's the best way to word this? One of the biggest fallacies that content creators believe is that they cannot create or recreate the same concept or restate the same concept again. And one that comes out of pride because we believe that everyone sees everything we see because we're the most important person in the world.
Yeah,
And that's easy for me to say to you as you ask that question, but that's what I believe. Like,
sure.
well, I can't talk about this concept because I already talked about it. And then when I
You're right.
step back and I go, well, no one sees everything I do. And then two, people ask me the same freaking questions
Over
every
and over.
week on YouTube, and I go, I answered this like 6 months ago. Um, and so you have to say, and look at people. Someone that I think is the king of content, Dave Ramsey, and
Yep.
you look at his whole baby steps thing. It's so simple, and you think about the guy's had a show for 30 years. After 30 years, he's got to come up with something new. But people call in, and the solution to the problem is just follow the plan. This is the plan. Follow the plan. And so
Yeah.
it's easy to think we've got to come up with something new, but there's nothing new under the sun. It's just you've got to reiterate, and you've got to constantly refine how you share your message, and find where people are getting hung up. And I have found in particular show not tell is super important. I tend to be more of a tell person, and I tend
Yeah.
to. It's easy for me to connect the dots, and I've realized for a lot of folks, you got to really slow it down, and you've got to not try. You've got to not hope that they connect the dots. You've got to like show them,
Yeah.
and not because people are stupid, but because if they're not in this 24/7 like I am, they're not going to think about it that way.
Yeah, no, as you're talking, what clicked for me 20 seconds into your answer was leaders know that in order for anything they say to be sticky, they have to repeat it so much that the sound of them saying it again makes themselves nauseous, because
Yeah,
that's right when people are just starting to hear it for the first time.
yeah,
Like it's why Dave Ramsey is still going, again, folks, it's baby step number 2,
yeah,
you know, over and
yeah,
over again. So I think you're right. I think in my mind, I was looking at it from a perspective of everybody is seeing everything and it's out there. So I could easily just, instead of recreating it, I could easily just go, here's a throwback Thursday to this thing I did,
yeah,
4 years ago, kind of thing. But yeah,
yeah.
you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Where who or where did you, I know you talked a lot, you referenced a lot of books. But who or where did you learn this process from?
I am someone who I've never officially had a mentor. And that always bugged me growing up. Like I can specifically think of a couple different people that I asked, like, "Hey, will you mentor me?" And everyone always said no. Not I don't think because of me, but just because of time or whatever. So I'm just like, I mean, I'm a learner, so I just pick up and I just try stuff. So it's interesting. I will say, I don't know if this is the heart of your question, but for people that want to get into this, the absolute best resource I can suggest right now is a book called Content Inc by Joe Pulizzi, Content Inc. Inc. And he was an early guy. I just read this book like 2 years ago, but he was an early guy that talked about how to be a content entrepreneur. Like I think he kind of invented that phrase. And he worked with like some of the copy blogger folks early in the day, and a lot of people deep in that world know him. I did not know him until a couple years ago, but I read his book and I went, "Oh, this is a process I was following without knowing I was following
Yeah,
it."
without putting words to it, without putting skin to it.
Yeah. So for me, it just started years ago. Yeah. So there's no formal person. It's really interesting you asked that. There's no formal person that said, "Will." Like now, it's very popular to be a creator. It's a lot of people aspiring to do that or wanting to do that.
It's
Um,
easier now than it's ever been.
Yeah, the resources are incredible to do that. But I mean, I think Seth Godin was a big guy back in the day. He didn't really talk about content entrepreneurship, but he did talk about being a linchpin. And Cal Newport's so good they can't ignore you. Here's what's crazy, Destin, and I won't say the artist. I'll tell you off once we end because I don't know that the tour will actually happen. But um, I um, I got a call, I got an email like a month ago from someone, and they said, "Hey, I'm looking for someone to fill in and do playback on a tour with this artist." And if I said the artist, I mean, you and I are, we're not old, but we're old enough that we know who it is, and older people
Hmm.
would be like, "Oh my gosh, it's like the Beatles." But and I was like, "Yeah, I don't really do tours. Like I want to be with my kids and whatever, and my wife, and I not don't want to hit the road." But I started to look at the dates and things lined up, and I talked to my wife, and I'm like, this could actually be a really great opportunity. Well, anyway, I called the people and I talked to the girl who reached out, and then talked to the music director. And what was fascinating to me is the music director of this particular band. Well, if I say too much, then people can figure out. But music director for this particular band has played with massive artists, and the band that's on stage with this artist have played with people everyone knows. And what they said that was really fascinating to me is they were trying to find someone to fill in, and the music director said, "Why don't you reach out to Will? Like there's no one better in the world at doing this than Will." And it took me back to Cal Newport's "So Good They Can't Ignore You," which is a adaptation of a quote from Steve Martin.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't believe I'm the best person in the world at doing playback, but I am um, arguably the best person in the world at creating content talking about that. There's great
Yeah.
people, Laura Escade, my all friends, Henry Strange, Mike McKnight, like these really great playback techs. But I think I'm uniquely gifted where I'm just smart enough to understand it, just dumb enough to like communicate it. But I just got out there and started creating content and created lots and lots and lots and lots of content. And it's at the point now where if you Google almost anything about Ableton Live, particularly Ableton Live and live performance, it's either going to be all, five of the videos that show up will be mine, or the majority of the ones will be mine. And that's all by uh, like design, like
Yeah.
it didn't just happen that way. It's like I busted my butt last year to create content to fill in gaps and get really strategic. Um, do Google searches and see what the top 5, top 10 things people are asking and create content for that. So anyway, yeah, there's no real person I learned that from, but I say all that to say what's wild about that story of them reaching out and saying, "Hey, would you be interested in doing this tour?" Is I still don't feel like I'm good enough to like I still don't feel like I am the best in the world at that. But what I am the best of the world at in this space is just getting out there and creating content.
Yeah.
And so anyway, yeah, you just got to get out and do it. You got to like
Yeah.
start creating stuff and keep testing and listening and creating more and just keep going at it.
Yeah. My last two questions you have kind of already answered. I just want to circle back and pinpoint a couple of things that you said. My fourth question is, where do you get your inspiration from? You started to mention in that last answer about Googling questions that people are asking. And I just came across this piece of content the other day. I think it was on an Instagram reel, or somebody sent me a TikTok or whatever. But it was basically this woman showing her process for creating content
Mm,
and knowing what content people are looking for. And she'll
yeah.
just Google the topic, and then if you scroll down, you'll see like the top 5 questions that people are asking about that topic.
Hmm.
Then she just goes writes and releases content that answers that question,
Yeah.
that answers each one of those questions. And so it sounds like that's where you're going a little bit for inspiration too. Am I correct there?
Yeah, let me give you, and I'll do this in like 2 minutes. Let me give you very
Go.
tactical, practical things. One, go to Google, type in whatever your subject is. I'll pick mine, Ableton Live. Just look at the autocomplete stuff and you'll see what the autocomplete suggestions are for that.
Mhm.
Write that down. There's a tool called Answer the Public, I think. You can do a free trial. There's some kind of limited that gives you an expanded view of that and words and terms related. That's a really good starting place. That's a very practical tool. Related to that is YouTube, same thing. Like type in a search thing and then look at autocomplete and then look what pops up. What I found that's really beneficial to follow on the back end of that, like those are two tricks that I've used for a while and I've heard people do. But what makes it really beneficial is on the back end of that is go look at every single piece of content. Like I just did a video the other day that's a subject I have talked about till I've been blue in the face for the past 10 years. I know everything there's to know about that. But what I went and did is I found every video on YouTube that someone talked about a similar thing, including my own stuff. And I went and I looked at the comments and I went, okay, where
Mhm.
did I miss my last explanation of this? That five people said, but why do you do it this way? Blah, 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 blah. And then you write down those questions and then you start to build your outline off of that. So Google, YouTube, I mean, any social media stuff, look at content people have created, look at questions that people are asking because they missed it. I
Yeah.
missed it when I did that video. That person missed it. Those are really big. The other thing that's amazing, people love talking about themselves. People love feeling in charge. So not surveys necessarily, because survey feels very whatever, but on social media, um, what's one thing? This is a question I often use. What's one thing you wish Ableton Live did that it doesn't?
Mhm.
And put that in your context. And about 58% of people that answer that, maybe 70%, will say things that it already currently does.
It does. They just don't know how.
They just don't know how. So
Yeah.
then I go, okay, that's a place for content. As you know, again, asking people is a huge one. But I mean, if you just do those autocomplete searches, if you follow up and look at comments is a big one. If you
Mm.
ask people, and then the thing that Content Inc. that book I mentioned before, and I'm
Yeah.
pointing because it's behind me. Something that Joe mentioned in that book that I've never thought about that I did at the beginning of last year, before I headed into like creating lots of content, is he said, sit down and write every single question you think people would have about this topic. Ableton Live, how do I perform on stage with Ableton Live? Write down every possible question you can think of, and
Mhm.
then try as best as you can to go back to when you were starting and think of what's the entire process
Right.
from knowing nothing to there. And that's what I struggle with a lot, is like going back to those early days, campus
Yeah.
band, using tracks. Write that whole thing down. And if you do those five things or however many I mentioned, you'll never, ever, ever, ever run out of an idea.
You're right.
And the bonus last piece is, as you release content, you got to watch it and you got to listen to comments and you got to see what people are saying, either about your presentation, about the content itself, the stories you're telling, how you're connecting. And if you do that, you'll never ever run out of ideas at all, ever
Yeah.
again.
You're absolutely right. I've been in this early phase of content ideation, and it's endless.
Yeah,
The amount of content that I'm just, it's ready for me to go answer these questions. It's ready for me to go create and release this stuff. It's definitely endless, and people are always, because people are always gonna be around as long as we're still here, right? Like,
yeah,
people are gonna be around. They're gonna continue to ask more and more questions. Someone's eventually going to ask a question that's never been asked before, or at least in a way that's never been asked before, and you're going to have to pose your answer slightly different than you have before. All these things. My last question for you, I want to be sensitive to your time. The last, you've kind of alluded to this throughout the interview so far, but my question was, how do you decide which content release and which content isn't ready yet?
mm,
I know you've mentioned several times throughout this interview about the process of just shipping product, just getting it out there
yeah.
as quickly as possible. So for you, are you even using that filter of if it's good enough or not, or if it's ready or not, or are you, like, when do you go, okay, I think I'm finally ready to at least beta test, is my baby cute enough?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I would always tell people, though I don't always follow this, I would always tell you to err more on the side of just release.
Yeah.
When in doubt, release. You have to balance that though with your own personality and knowing your tendencies. And I tend to over ideate, and I tend to over. I mean, if you go downstairs, it's next to my bed, a set of index cards. I have index cards by my desk and index cards by my bed, just in case something strikes me. But the amount of index cards I have related to products I hope to release this year or new ways to sell a subscription is vast. And it helps me to have my wife to run ideas past, because she'll go, you're just like, oh, you're confusing people here, like you got eight
Hmm.
products, like one product. And I think that's one thing that's been beneficial to me, is when people say, what do you sell? I sell a subscription. Like, there's
Hmm.
not, there's annual, there's monthly, it's a subscription. Now
Yeah.
I will on the back end have different offers I offer to people based on, their persona or whatever. But yeah, I think in general, err on the side of releasing it. um as far as knowing when it's ready or not, I think I'm getting a little better at knowing when content will resonate versus not resonate. But there's some content I feel is important enough I'm going to release regardless, even though I know it's not going to be a big hit, you know, and a big hit for me now on YouTube at this era that I'm in is like if I release a video and in the first 2 days it's 1,000 to 2,000 views, which is very, very small compared to most people. But if I do that, then I know that content really resonated. And that tends to be around certain topics that I've found, gear, very tactical, how to do this in Ableton Live. Some of the more soft skill stuff that I enjoy talking about doesn't resonate, but there's a part of my crowd that it resonates very highly with. And so I will still release that stuff knowing it's going to get 100 to 200 views. It'll maybe eventually grow to 1,000 in a couple months if I'm lucky, but it's going to re-energize that particular part of my audience that I want to speak to and energize there. Or it's just something selfishly I want to release. So I'll give you a very practical example right now. I started a video that I wanted to be a little more YouTube-y, you know, like Mr. Beast or these people do like experiments. Like I spent 7 days on blah, blah, blah. I wanted to do something where I basically ran a Mac Mini headless, which means no monitors or whatever, in the cloud, and ran Ableton Live on it to see could I like record and you know, remotely on that, could I play back tracks and have multiple outputs come back remotely? Again, very technical I'm talking here, but it's kind of like in limbo right now because I have to make sure the way I present it is presented well, and I don't know that
Yeah.
I've told that story well enough yet. And so eventually, maybe I'll just release it. Maybe it'll be something I never release. But a perfect example is like I started because I needed to fill in some gaps for content. Last year, I did a couple Reacts videos where I would pull up like videos of
Yeah.
people showing
I
the
watched
rig
this.
and react to them. Yeah,
Mhm.
and I it literally took me 6 minutes, one take. It's the lowest budget of low budget.
Mhm.
And I was like, this is going to be a disaster. And it's some of the highest watch content I have.
Yeah.
And people love it. And so it's kind of like, I didn't think that was ready. And I didn't think I had that format figured out. But I just realized probably the most impactful thing I've learned in the past year is the content. I need to find a better way to package this and say it. But like, if you want to create content that resonates with people that people like, then create content people like, which is like, well, no crap,
Yeah.
Sherlock.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. But I realized on Instagram, even though I'm not currently practicing this, you can see phases of me learning this. But if I take an image, my thumbnail image, and I resize it in Canva, which is so easy to do, and I share that on Instagram and say, "Hey, click the link in my bio to go watch my video," the engagement of that is super low. Some people maybe comment, some people maybe go off of the platform to go watch it. But if I take that piece of content and turn it into something that's actually valuable to them, that provides value, like I just did a video on why we should value community over competition.
Hmm.
And if I turn that into a little Instagram carousel of those 5 points in text, then right there, I have a package of the same content, but that package is valuable as opposed to that what it is right now, which is an image, the thumbnail image of me doing this, which provides no value to that person other than
Yeah.
a signal to say, go watch my thing. But if
Yeah.
I repackage that, then it's tons of value. And amazingly, surprisingly, when you create content people like, then more people will like it and watch it and see it. So um, sounds like wow, what an epiphany, Will. But we like always think there's a hack. The reason Mr. Beast is big is because he figured out this hack. He figured out this thing. No, he creates content people want to see. Um, Final book recommendation.
Let's go.
If you do YouTube whatsoever, then the YouTube formula. The cover is back there, but the YouTube formula by Daryl Eves. He's the executive producer of The Chosen. But he's worked with like you open the cover, it's Mr. Beast, people I don't know who they are, but YouTubers that like he's worked with every YouTuber in the world. But this is the best book on like how to create content that resonates with people on YouTube, and he teaches you stop creating content for the algorithm and create content for people and release
Mm.
content how watch how people respond, do your research stuff, and the algorithm will follow people. And so that's kind of like he says there's no hack, it's just do the work, you know.
Yeah.
Turn pro, as Pressfield says. So um, yeah, that's like that's a I think a huge thing is just release the stuff, watch how people do it, and repackage it in different forms
Mhm.
so that it's valuable to people.
Yeah. Man, I love it. There's so much gold in our short time together today. I'm gonna have to just rewatch it 1,000 times for myself just to learn. I took so many notes. I got a whole page of notes down here. I can't thank you enough for your time, man. Your process is so refined and so valuable. I love that throughout. I just kept hearing Dwayne Carson, who was a
Yeah.
pastor at Liberty the entire time, going, "Leaders or learners,"
Yeah.
the whole time, because you just like, here's a book, here's a book, here's a book, here's a guy, here's a person. But I love that. I think we share that commonality where we realize that we don't have all the answers, and there are
Mm.
people that have, packaged their content, for very low cost for just here's the answer,
Yeah.
or here's their view of the answer, and
Yeah.
it's so valuable to have. So, thank you for your time, man. Thank you for all the wisdom and the resources. I can't thank you enough. I hope to have you on again for sure and talk more about your process and your creativity. I feel like there's so much more we could really dive into. But thanks for joining me today, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, so if you're watching this, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel. I got to do all the businessy stuff now, so you just got to sit and watch me be weird. So I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, share this with your friends, post it wherever you think it would be helpful. I also want to make mention to where you can find Will. You can find him on from studio to stage.com. Is where he's living these days, or also on Instagram, which sounds like it's about to get real lit in Q2, is from studio to stage IG on Instagram. So check him out and just enjoy all the things that he's putting out. Even if you have, like, I don't even know what Ableton is, just learn from what Will's doing because it's invaluable. So that's all for this time on 5 Questions. We'll talk to you next time.